Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's live interview on how to succeed at fleet safety with our special guest, Tom Armstrong, Director of Fleet at thyssenkrupp Elevator. Although we do have quite a bit to discuss, we are aiming to keep the interview to around 20 minutes. We really want to give everyone some time at the conclusion to ask Tom their fleet safety questions. Just to quickly give you a rundown on the portfolio of products that we offer in fleet safety. As you can see at the bottom left, our How's My Driving program. It's the most robust, cost-effective in the industry. The MVRs, which allow you to do a number of things, including new hire vetting, as well as routine reviews of current drivers. And our telematics solution using GeoTab, the industry leader with the most tested technology on the market today, and the newest e-learning in the industry. And although not a standalone product per se, the coaching application icon here, which is really all about the post-incident follow-up and documenting the manager-employee meeting to reinforce the safety message. To quickly put a face to a name, I'm Rich Sordahl, responsible for marketing at Drivers Alert. And just a little bit about us, our resume. We have more than 1,500 clients, 350,000 plus vehicles currently under contract, and that translates into literally millions of documented unsafe driving events shared with our customers since our inception in 1989. And we're also a trusted partner for more than 100 companies in the insurance industry. And the main theme over those 28 years of existence is most definitely innovation. I don't want to go into all the details, but we are responsible for doing a lot of firsts over these 28 years. We're one of the longest running tenures in the fleet safety industry, and we're one of the pioneers in the How's My Driving product. And over those 28 years, we've rolled out many firsts, including the first to be the one to offer high visibility reflective decals for night viewing, first to assign unique vehicle IDs, first to offer a recording, an audio recording that is, of the motorist call and send that to clients so managers can hear the concerned motorists themselves. And we're also the first to integrate incident-specific online training. We also were the first in the industry to offer a closed-loop corrective action process that actually takes incident-specific training and marries that with the actual incident itself so that we can improve driving behavior and send people out on the roads safer drivers. We're also the first to offer a safety-based telematics application, looking beyond just the operational efficiency and maintenance side of things to really focus on the driver, because we do believe that is the biggest variable when it comes to fleet safety. And of course, as I mentioned, next generation e-learning, which is the newest, freshest content available in the industry. So today's goals, really three things. Why we're here. Fleet safety is critical. It's for most of us, it's really driving a motor vehicle, is the most dangerous thing we do, and we do it every single day. So it's very important. Second piece is unsafe driving is really expensive. It could amount to a variety of things. Vehicle collisions could lead, of course, to mental costs, asset downtime, worker lost time, and even lawsuits. And finally, it's really wanted to give everybody an opportunity to hear an inside perspective for someone who does this for a living. Break that traditional approach of the webinars we've done in the past by giving you a different point of view. So today's goals, we're going to talk about thyssenkrupp's business and culture, how they use the 1-800 How's My Driving product, including the manager-employee meeting and the corrective action training. And then Tom's going to talk a little bit about implementing safety programs and the challenges and how he overcomes those, and then discuss his usage and application of the motor vehicle records service, and then talk about his keys to success and what he's seen over the years and where he thinks the industry is going. Then we'll open it up to the audience for questions and announce the Starbucks gift card winner. So with that said, Tom Armstrong serves as the director for fleet at thyssenkrupp Elevator, which is one of the largest and most respected elevator companies in the world. He oversees a fleet of more than 3,500 vehicles, including light-duty vans, pickup trucks, medium-duty vehicles, and conventional automobiles. In his 17 years at thyssenkrupp, Tom has worked tirelessly to increase ROI, adopt sustainable practices, and build on a culture of safety first. Prior to thyssenkrupp, Tom owned and operated a freight company based in Florida and served 6 years in the United States Air Force. In all, Tom has more than 25 years of experience in the fleet industry. And so, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and adjust this microphone so we make sure we have a good reach here and get comfortable. So, Tom, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you. It's a privilege to have you in studio as a guest. Really excited to get your perspective on fleet safety.
Hey, thanks, Rich. Happy to be here.
Tom, let's go ahead and jump right in. how did you get started in fleet?
Well, not to bore anybody, I think you covered most of it. After the Air Force, I kind of got into the delivery and freight business. Eventually owned and operated my own freight company. After that, it kind of led me into fleet management, which I've been doing for the past 25 years, and the last 17 years with thyssenkrupp Elevator.
Okay, good. And Tom, obviously, we all know what elevators are, but can you lift the hood, so to speak, and give us a quick overview of just what the day-to-day operations are like at thyssenkrupp as it pertains to fleet? Just give the audience a sense or paint a picture of what that looks like.
I guess the best, you could say we're a service and technology company. And the day-to-day in the elevator technology is comprised of different departments: service, repair, modernization, new installation. Each has its own vehicle needs, and I'd say about 90% of our 3,500 vehicle fleet goes home with our drivers at night.
How would you describe the safety culture at thyssenkrupp?
I'd say the highlights are I guess mainly at thyssenkrupp, safety runs deep in our culture. It's the way we do business on the job, day in and day out. It's always safety first. And I think this is a message from our executive team and throughout our organization. That being said, it's kind of easier than being said or done, trying to apply that same culture to our fleet. But so far, I think we've come a long way, and we're doing a lot of good things. We got the How's My Driving, we've got, the MVRs being run. We're using the e-learning for our driver training.
And how did you get introduced to Driver's Alert?
That's kind of a funny story. Sometime around 2008, we were looking for driver training, and I met Paul Milazzo, who was one of your founders. He had mentioned your 800 How's My Driving program, but back then I told Paul, I said, hey, we already had our in-house program. We're using our Elevator 800 call center. It was working good for us. But Paul, being Paul, he's very consistent and persistent. And finally, after kicking him to the curb a few times, politely that is, we went ahead and heard him out. And at that point, I kind of realized how inefficient and ineffective our so-called How's My Driving program was. But then, when you add in the corrective action driving safety training courses and the link to the specific, how those link to the specific incidents themselves, it's kind of a no-brainer to outsource the program to Driver's Alert.
Can you talk a little bit about the How's My Driving program? So how do you manage incident calls? How do you follow up on them? And just overall, just for the audience, how does the process at thyssenkrupp work?
Well, the calls going in, they're answered quick. The calls all get, the facts are all fleshed out through the vetting source, the reporting, the follow-up, and, I want to say maybe even most important, the tracking, ensuring action is taken in the field. Now that action could be consultation with the driver, or if we want to, we can click on a link that's provided, which is actually tied to the How's My Driving incident. But, either way, the system tracks and it requires a response from the field. And that's kind of the beauty of the system. We don't need a person to monitor and track it. The system does that for us using our hierarchy system. But hey, I kind of digressed into the How's My Driving when the original search was about driver training.
Oh, no, no problem, Tom. So, since you went down this road on How's My Driving, one area we get asked quite a bit is that manager-employee meeting. It's a critical piece in reinforcing that safety message and in ensuring that behavior change takes place. So, let's say you have received an incident report on a driver and you need to set up a time to discuss the details, determine what the circumstances were that day, hear the employee's side of the story. How does thyssenkrupp approach this really sensitive area?
That's a tough one, but I think you have to look at it, and the way we look at it is, there's always two sides to the story, and we've got to realize that. There are plenty of calls that you must take with a grain of salt, and say, hey, okay, we've all done that. But I believe the program works also as a reminder to the employee that, hey, I am in a company vehicle and I should, act accordingly. I think another case would be, especially when that first call comes to the driver and when you're sitting down with them and he can reflect back and say, hey, I didn't have to pull out in front of that person at that time, just using that as an example. So we do, the drivers do have an opportunity to sit down and then we actually record, their statement.
And that brings up a good question. So, in your case at thyssenkrupp, what are some common outcomes of that manager-employee meeting?
Well, when we deployed the program, we made it clear this was not being put in place for disciplinary action. It's here to identify bad driving behavior and correct it. It's about making our employees better drivers. And yes, ultimately, it's always about reducing accidents. Probably about 60 to 70% of the time, the manager will have a verbal consultation with the driver. Driver training, going to be used for the more serious calls, and or, that driver that has multiple calls. Now, even though I mentioned this is not about disciplinary action, excessive calls or serious calls could lead to disciplinary action.
Oh, that does bring me up to a question then. So you mentioned excessive and serious calls. So how do you define what an excessive call is and a serious call?
That might be a little lengthy, but right away the serious calls are speeding, the tailgater. This is the accident waiting to happen.
Just for our audience, built into the How's My Driving program are 6 e-learning courses that address the most common acts of unsafe driving. So when a driver receives a call for, let's say, speeding, his supervisor will assign him the course on speeding. So in your particular case now, Tom, we all know that it can be challenging for employees who spend so much time out in the field to find that time to actually train. So when and where do employees typically take the training during their workday?
It's tough for us because, as I mentioned before, downtime is critical for us, and the vehicles do go home with our drivers. So driver might be called into the office for training when it's convenient for the branch and for the driver, or maybe it's in conjunction with another event back at the office. It's tough for our guys to do it at home, given the structure of our business. For others that might work. But on a good note, the training courses are normally short, so that helps.
And, of course, we all know that a safety program is only as good as its level of buy-in. So finding that quote unquote champion in management who will keep the process alive and also integrate that program into the fabric of the employee culture. So in terms of overcoming challenges and implementing a new safety program, what are you looking for, Tom? I mean, in terms of just that necessary buy-in from both management and employees.
I think from things that come to mind first, especially for management, I'd say is simplicity, ease of use, quick access. Is it effective? And also limiting our downtime. And, maybe most importantly, our cost. it took us a little time to get buy-in, given we had our own number and that had no cost to it. As good as the How's My Driving feature is, the driver training and that structure that you offered is what we really needed. And then I guess from a driver perspective, I would suspect, hey, make it quick, make it easy, and probably most of all, hey, don't let it be boring.
Okay, good. So let's move on to the motor vehicle record service. Tom, you've been using Driver's Alert's MVR review service now for about 3 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what about the Driver's Alert MVR service do you like the most?
We've used many, but one thing that comes to mind, I guess, about yours is that it's easy and it's quick. Never have we had such a quick turnaround of the MVR. Most are back to us within minutes of requesting them.
How do you utilize the MVRs at thyssenkrupp? What does it look like? I know every company has a different approach, but how are you applying MVRs?
I guess it's a number of ways. One, we're going to pull them on most of all of our prospective employees who are going to be driving a vehicle. But we'll also run an MVR on any existing employee that we feel there's probable cause, maybe tied to the How's My Driving, maybe it's a careless accident, or any other reason that we suspect, the employee's record may have changed. But we also try to be proactive, and we'll sweep the country on a regular basis. Maybe we start on the West Coast and work across East branch by branch. And then once we're complete, a year and a half, 2 years, we go back and, start the process again.
And now, just changing gears for just a little bit, I understand a couple of years ago your risk and safety management team at thyssenkrupp came to you about inquiring about environmental health and safety training options. Is that correct?
Yes, they knew we did have a successful program in place, and they did inquire. At that point, your CEO, Mike Kroll, he mentioned that Driver's Alert had recently made major upgrades to their health and safety library. So I really just turned that over to our health and safety team, and they ran with that piece.
Okay. Tom, we've covered 3 fleet safety solutions thus far. So the 1-800 How's My Driving program, the motor vehicle record service, and training. Did you set out to establish a single source provider, or did it just kind of happen that way?
Well, I guess in short answer, it just kind of happened that way. But, we run a lean operation, and, our goal was to find the best in each area that we could manage effectively. The fact that they all came together in one organization, and I think that's definitely an added benefit. It's not like they all came together at the same time or overnight. They grew together over time, and you guys had to earn, each one individually.
And what would you say has been the single biggest advantage then in having one provider?
Well, I think anytime we can bundle items like these, it makes sense. It's easier to manage. Reporting is better and easier. And I guess importantly, I only need one ID and password to handle all of them. So I think we can all appreciate that.
Of course. So Tommy, you've been in the fleet industry, as we said, for 25 years. That's quite a long time, and I'm sure you've seen a lot. What do you attribute your longevity to?
Good question. I would say, my approaches, I'm always consistent. I think being fair, in all aspects of business and life. I think being respectful, and I think being adaptive to change. Not that we like all the change, but at least being adaptive. I also think whenever possible, you got to seek buy-in from the employees and people when it comes to adopting these safe practices. However, maybe sometimes you simply have to lay down the law. And I'm going to say I learned that piece from our Director of Health and Safety at thyssenkrupp.
And over those 25 years, including nearly 10 now, I guess, using driver's alert solutions, as I said, imagine you've seen quite a bit. What would you say are the keys to creating a fleet safety program that we like to say, we focus on the big three, increases safety awareness, does actually change behavior, and minimizes vehicle accidents?
Well, I think there are many ways to look at this, but first and foremost, I'd say your employees and drivers need to know that you care how they drive. I think they need to know that it really does matter. I think it goes back to our top executive management team creating the safety culture that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. And so here's one. This is a long question, so you might want to take a sip of water here, but it's one we hear a lot. Driver's Alert attends quite a bit of events each year. We've got trade shows, industry conferences, annual company meetings. Invariably, someone in a safety capacity, that could be a safety manager, safety director, they will approach either me or one of my colleagues, and they express some frustration about just that lack of having a voice in overall fleet purchase decisions. The argument typically is, predominantly operations and maintenance focus is really that's the focus of the mindset, and extremely difficult to get that proper attention needed for addressing driver safety within the fleet. So, for those in the safety profession who are not as fortunate to be working in a proactive and progressive company like thyssenkrupp, for our audience, they're struggling on a daily basis to attract more attention to that driver safety issue. What would you say to them? Any advice for breaking through that invisible barrier?
That was a big question. Hey, first, I'd like to say appreciate those accolades that you mentioned about thyssenkrupp. But I think that's it's a tough barrier to crack, and we also, we still have our own challenges. But in organizations, it's all about the bottom line, and it's all about the money. I think the sell needs to be that safety adds to that bottom line.
How would you say the practice of fleet safety has changed over the course of your career? And where do you see fleet safety going in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say, just like everything else, hands-on is dying. The fleet industry has embraced technology. So training is taking place online. In today's environment, I think more fleets are adopting formal training programs. So, an interesting study found that only about 13% of fleets actually have a formal safety program.
Okay, good. So, Tom, would you like to take some questions from the audience?
Not a problem.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So if you would, if you have a question for Tom Armstrong, please just go ahead and use your chat feature box, and we'll go ahead and take those in as they come. And let's see, we do have a couple here now. One question here is how easy is it to roll out the How's My Driving program?
Well, I guess first, we did this, back in 2008. So you're asking me to go back and remember all the aspects. It was easy as having the number. The one thing that your program had, you had your own number that you could use, but it was that easy. It was the number, getting them on the vehicles, and flipping the switch, and really. I think the biggest piece of it is getting your hierarchy in place, getting who you want to be notified of these How's My Driving, and then your system does everything else.
Okay, good. Here's another question. This one is what would actually cause your company to take a vehicle away from a driver? So I guess they're looking at what's that line where it becomes excessive, where it becomes so dangerous that somebody really is a hazard on the road.
In our industry, we're union drivers, or we're union employees who happen to be drivers. So, I mean, their job a lot of times requires driving. So it's really difficult. It's a difficult thing to take that away from a driver. So we do everything we can to keep our drivers on the road safe. And when it comes to those decisions, that really gets more into the field and the HR.
And here's one question also related to the How's My Driving program. We covered a little bit of it, and they're asking, do you think the program works, and why? Well,
we've been doing this since 2008. I think that's testimony there that we feel it works. I think the why, I think we pretty much covered that in a lot of these questions that we answered. It's an awareness factor. It ties into a driver training factor. And I don't think over the course since 2008 that we've had anybody come in and say that we should look at doing away with the program. It's a piece of our safety that I think has worked well for us over the years.
Okay, good. And I wanted to share, this isn't a question per se, but someone actually sent in a comment complimenting you, thanking you for your service over the years. So there's a good, that's a nice compliment. Here, another question too is related to management of How's My Driving program and fleet safety programs in general. Is it tough to get buy-in from management, or have you found it relatively easy to do?
It's a fast-paced world out there these days. So, buy-in is tough at anything, at any level. So yeah, I think we did somewhat cover that. So I believe that, we have a safety culture from the top down, and that helps get buy-in and drive these kind of programs. Without that, it becomes more difficult.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So this question is, what's next for thyssenkrupp when you're in your fleet? What are any initiatives you have underway? Anything going on that you'd like to talk about?
We always have our ear to the road for future technologies and all that. Down the road, I would hope we could, migrate to move into maybe a GPS system that could tie into our vehicle and maybe give us some additional feedback on our drivers. But we're pretty comfortable where we are right now, and I'm not sure that's any near-term change.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's all the time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the Q&A session, and I'll go ahead and close this out, and then we will get everybody on their way.